This set of episodes has been a lot of hard work for me. That sounds laughable, given that I've chosen to talk about comics out of my wazoo, and that is exactly what I have been doing, and I love to do that. But writing this series of episodes was way more complicated than I initially gave it credit for. I thought doing the Milestone books was going to be easy. Just reread the comics, record my thoughts on them, and bam, 5 episodes in the bag. Instead, I've ended up doing fairly detailed summaries of all of the series, plus my breakdown thoughts on them, and I found all of them to be more engaging and full of depth than I remembered them being on my first read-through. That's one of the best parts about doing breakdown, finding things in these books that I didn't notice my first time through. But the things that I find aren't always good things. As much as I enjoyed rereading comics like Static, Icon and Rocket, and Blood Syndicate, I was shocked to discover that I didn't really enjoy Hardware and Duo, 2 books that I had no problem reading on a monthly basis. So before we move on, let's take one last look at Milestone's output in totality. How did they do when creating a new take on an old shared universe? What ideas and concepts haven't they delivered on yet? Did they live up to their promise of improved representation? And where do they go next? My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 22.9, Departing Dakota. Before I get too far into my thoughts, I want to mention 2 things regarding Duo. The first is that I absolutely love the title font. It's this big, simple, chunky font that, of course, reads Duo in all capital letters. But you know how a U has that dip in the middle? Well, there's a thin line that makes that dip in the logo, and there are also thin lines that come down the upper portions of D and O, forming the middle sections as well. So those dips run down and then enter into another smaller set of letters inside the bigger ones. So you've got Duo in big letters, and then you've got Duo in small letters inside of it, echoing Kelly and David's situation in the comic. That's super clever logo design. It's simple, it's clean, and it perfectly communicates the concept of the comic. It's just neat design work. I think the logo actually does a better job encapsulating David and Kelly's situation than their costume in the comic does. And that's the point of a costume in a superhero comic. So, whoever designed this logo, you knocked it out of the park. Secondly, Duo is not a wholly original concept to this iteration of the Milestone universe. It is actually the second life of an old Milestone comic called Zombie, spelled Xombi. And if it's the second life of an old comic, then I suppose it's also literally a zombie. Look at that, back from the dead. Anyway, the original comic did indeed star Korean-American David Kim, who did create a revolutionary cloud of nanobots with hopes to save the world. But when his lab was sabotaged, the nanobots simply used the body of his secretary, Kelly, to repair his wounds. But that is where the similarities between Zombie and Duo stop. In the original comic, Kelly just died, and David was thrust into a world of science and spiritual mysticism. I haven't read any of Zombie's original volume, but there was a great critique that I found online while doing my research at the middle spaces called, quote, "Don't Call Me Zombie, Milestone's Representation of Korean-American Characters After the LA Uprisings, published in June of 2022, end quote. I'll put a link in the description of this episode if you're interested in reading it. It's long, it's a breakdown on crack, but man, it's a good read. In it, author Dr. Vincent Haddad examines Zombie and how it failed to empower David Kim, despite him having superpowers and despite it starring him. He says that David most often suffered painful and disfiguring injuries in the comic, which, yes, sure, he could heal from, but he would still suffer the pain of those injuries. Meanwhile, it was his white colleagues in the comic who addressed whatever the threat that was doing the disfiguring was. David's role was to buy time, basically to suffer so that white people could save the day. This facet of zombie was clearly done away with in Duo. While David and Kelly are attacked, no one else shows up to save the day. Even when they ally with Tinker and the Immutables, it is their power that secures the irredeemable. And it was also the sacrifice of Marius Chung, who was Asian, who drove the final threat back into the maw. So Milestone definitely improved their portrayal of Asian Americans from zombie to Duo, which is great. The book also made Kelly a defining member of its cast, where before in Zombie, she was just a victim. Unfortunately, Kelly is still the one that is killed here. Author Greg Pak could have switched their roles. Kelly's body could have lived, and David would have been the one who died, only to be reborn in her mind. What kind of different story would we have had then? It's impossible to know, but it does highlight one of my few problems with Milestone's return. For a company that built itself on representation, none of these comics star a woman. Static, Hardware, Duo, and Blood Syndicate, quite frankly, all star men. Icon and Rocket is the closest that we come to a woman leading the book, and even then, Rocket is still sharing it with Icon. Out of the two of them, he is the more physically powerful partner, he's more intelligent and worldly, and without his technology, Rocket wouldn't exist. Without him, Rocket is just Raquel, a young woman dating an aspiring criminal with little hope for the future. An argument could be made that Kelly co-stars with David in Duo, and I will give that she is a hugely influential character in the comic, as was Raquel. But at the end of the day, it's David's body that she's trapped in, it's David who appears on the cover of the comics, and to everyone that they meet, they're meeting David Kim first, and maybe not Kelly Vu at all. To be fair, women do play critically important roles in all of the comics. We have Virgil's family providing support in Static, Tiffany and Baraki both appear in Hardware, of course we've got Rocket and Icon and Rocket, as well as Xiomara, Kelly over in Duo, and Blood Syndicate has Maria and Sarah. But honestly, the main focus of all of those stories is the men, who make the main decisions, who drive all of the action, and who are the narrative center of the comic. I am not trying to downplay the roles that these women played in the comics. I mean, without Flashback and Blood Syndicate, the whole team is dead by the end of issue 5. But it is Tech 9 putting together the plan, even the second time that they have a go at Holocaust. He is the one who talks to Icon and Rocket, he is the one who names the group, and he's the one who feels like their leader. Often, Carlos or Rolando have to calm the more emotional Sarah down within the comic so that she can communicate clearly and then they can make the decisions based on the intel that she's brought. I'm not saying that the ladies of Milestone suck. Quite the opposite. I think that they are well written, smart, and largely independent in their own lives. But their lives are not the lives that Milestone chooses to focus on. And I think that's a shame. Other than that, how did Milestone do overall? Most of my comic buying career has been wading hip deep into established continuity, figuring out character relationships and histories as I've gone along. I haven't had a lot of opportunities to start a comic book universe when it's first launched. The biggest and most impactful for me was the launch of CrossGen Comics, and so I've been mentally comparing Milestone's 3 launch titles, technically 5, even though Duo and Blood Syndicate came way later, to CrossGen's initial offering of 4 titles. And when I do that, I have to say that Milestone failed. Milestone Media does deliver on a enjoyable comic book experience. I like the characters that I've met so far. I think that they are compelling and interesting. They have a diverse set of powers, life situation, and stories told, which is also super well appreciated. The artwork was overall solid, save for a few really bad jump cuts in Hardware, and my own personal dislike of Koi Fam on Duo, and I realize that's a personal dislike, that's not an overall critique. that ultimately still leaves Milestone with 4 excellent-looking titles, so I consider the art a win overall. If Milestone had been planning to launch 3 comics with no plans to connect them at all, then I think that they could have done a really awesome job. If you remove the mentions of Icon from Static, and Static reaching out to Curtis Metcalf, then the book's focus is much more honed in on Virgil. Yes, he would lose some of the materials that he got from Curtis, but I could spitball several ways for him to get that tech or similar tech, or just build it himself easily. Doing so would honestly make Virgil feel like a more empowered lead character, where he's not relying on this outside source for help. Similarly, if the connection to Virgil is removed from Hardware, literally nothing about Hardware's book changes. He doesn't make a single phone call. And given how frustrated I find myself over the tease that Hardware is going to go after Icon, I definitely wish that hadn't been set up. Hardware's comic honestly wrapped up so horribly. I don't know if Curtis is still wanted by the law or not. I don't know if Edwin Alva was actually arrested and lost control of his company. I don't know what Curtis plans for the future after being an armored super fugitive, or how he feels about Tiffany having her own Hardware suit, or anything. But I know Hardware wants to punch Icon, and that's just dumb. Isolating these characters into their own corners of the Milestone universe, and then bridging those pockets of isolation with future stories or crossovers would have made for a much better reading experience, in my opinion. But Milestone wasn't launching 3 separate comics that had nothing to do with each other. They were launching a shared universe. And it's really with the shared aspect of their universe that I think Milestone starts to fall apart. There are connections aplenty, but those connections are either ill-defined, unimpressive, or outright contradictory. Virgil being a mentee of Curtis Metcalf is a great idea. I love that idea. But that relationship is botched by the inaccurate continuity of their books. Virgil says in Static that he was trying not to contact Curtis specifically because he's on the run. But then when you read Hardware, Curtis says that he's missed several calls from Virgil while he's on the run when Virgil wasn't making phone calls to him. We also see Curtis call Virgil back and tell him to keep his head down and to stay out of trouble, but that message is never passed along during Virgil's comic at any point. What's the point of having 2 books share a continuity if the continuity that they're sharing isn't the same? There's also the connection between Virgil and Raquel, who do share a school setting. And again, this is a neat idea as it creates an easy and fairly natural relationship between the two. As classmates, they might be great friends, or they might hate each other. Maybe they're actually terrible classmates, but they get along better in their costumed identities where they can relax a little bit. That could be a super interesting dynamic. But the idea of them as friends or partners or even just acquaintances is introduced so incredibly late in Icon and Rocket's story that the pair don't have any time to develop any kind of relationship. Additionally, in that comic, Virgil's treated basically like a paranoid stalker, which feels very different from his portrayal in his own comic. Static showing up in Icon and Rocket doesn't add anything to Rocket's story, other than cementing the idea that they have a connection in the Milestone universe, and don't you like when comic books have connections? But if that connection isn't going to benefit the story, then you don't have to do it. Now, when Icon and Rocket show up in Blood Syndicate, that's a connection that works. The pair don't only perfectly demonstrate what the new status quo is on Paris Island to returning soldier Roland, but their defeat at the hands of Holocaust perfectly demonstrates how dangerous he is. This connection serves the story. There is also an odd background concept that pervades the Milestone universe, but isn't really explored at all. I don't know what that status quo is supposed to be. Icon and Rocket's debut predates the arrival of most modern super beings in the Milestone universe. We see Icon announce himself and his intentions as an alien superhero in the Milestone Returns one-shot set before any of the rest of the stories happen. But then there's no in-universe follow-up to that announcement. We never see what the public's reaction to the existence of aliens is, and as such, Icon status as a public figure is super unknown. But despite being unknown, he's still referenced in the comic. He doesn't feel like a worshipped hero like Superman or Captain America are, but he also isn't considered a myth like someone like Batman. In Static, we hear Virgil's parents comment that they're afraid that they're going to treat Virgil like they treat Icon, which implies that Icon is mistreated somehow. Maybe he's feared by the public or blasted in the media or hunted by the government, I don't know, but Icon and Rocket's main story, where he is hunted by the government, happens after Static's story happens. So Benedict Lord's attack on Icon hadn't happened yet. So there's no government attack on Icon for Virgil's parents to be referencing yet. So what the floop are you talking about, Virgil's dad? This is just a big mishandling of your background continuity. Then we have Hardware spotting Icon at the end of his comic, and he doesn't know who Icon is. And I'm sorry, but how is that possible? While Curtis has been on the run for a couple of weeks, Icon and Rocket started their war on drugs weeks before the Big Bang, which is what set Curtis on the run, even happened. I have an incredibly hard time believing that someone as scientifically minded as Curtis would not have been amazed at the existence of aliens, especially ones with superpowers who are operating on Earth. Icon's speech to the UN would have made national news. Hell, it would have made international news for weeks. And Curtis's ignorance is laughable to me. He should at the very least know who Icon is, if only vaguely. And then we have the setup for a fight between them, with, I forgot the character's name, the kid's dad commenting that it's sad that the only heroes in this world aren't human, you know? And first off, that's xenophobic, sir. And secondly, what about Rocket? What about Static? Rocket and Icon are a duo, sure, rarely acting without the other one, but Static took over the news to tell Dakota that he is going to be protecting the people against government abuse. Did Dad not see that broadcast? Does he not have the internet? Like, I'm sure that got saved and is posted on YouTube somewhere. Did he just miss it? Out of the 4 heroes that Milestone has launched with, only one of them is an alien. I can see Curtis having an interest in Icon, yeah. He's an engineer and a scientist, why wouldn't he be fascinated? But I don't understand why he would be itching for a fight at all. And then, just to add to my confusion and distaste, we get a brief follow-up of this idea in a one-shot called Milestones in History. Milestones in History is an 88-page one-shot released in August of 2022, celebrating Black excellence in world history. There's a brief introduction by Icon, Rocket, and Static, written by Reggie Hudland, and then we have 10 stories making up the rest of the comic. Each story stands alone and focuses on a single person of African descent in real-world history. These stories are written by a variety of creative teams, often pulling in novelists or TV writers, and I'll freely admit that they vary in quality. I chose not to cover this book in my breakdown for 2 reasons. The first is that it doesn't further any of our characters' narratives. There is something within it that I'll get to in a minute. Just hang on, this has to do with my hardware complaint. And secondly, I didn't cover this comic because it isn't a single coherent story. After our big 3 introduced the basic concept of the one-shot, one of the first stories in it sees Raquel and Virgil paired together for a class project researching a historical figure. Virgil is treated much as he was in Icon and Rocket, as a horn dog, hungry for Raquel's attention and affection, while Raquel is quietly disinterested in him and more knowledgeable about what their project could be. I have to admit, I actually like Virgil being historically uneducated. He's a science nerd, not a history nerd. But I do have trouble believing that Raquel, who has been skipping school for weeks, if not months, we literally see her go to school once in the Icon and Rocket comic book, and every other appearance by her has been outside of school doing things. I find it hard to believe that she can rattle off historical figures with ease and with absolutely no research done. I'm becoming a fan of history in my old age, and even I have problems with names, dates, and places. I host a podcast about comic books and comic book history, and even I have a hard time remembering those kinds of things. If we had seen more of Raquel in school in her own comic, that would at least lay the foundation of this idea for me. Or, honestly, a Milestone could have just ignored the whole idea of Raquel being in school until they do the follow-up series when she goes to her Swedish academy or chooses not to or whatever they want to do. But whether that's appropriate for her character or not doesn't matter, because once the story ends, that's it for this framing sequence. We don't see Virgil or Raquel for the rest of the comic. And I don't understand why. It would have been super easy to just have all of the historical articles that are presented been research that they were doing. Maybe Raquel could have even introduced Virgil to Icon, who, being alive for 200 years, could have first-hand knowledge of one of these figures. But no, we just get well-drawn Wikipedia articles with no framing device at all, leaving it feeling incredibly disjointed from the rest of the Milestone universe. Ugh. The book ends on the one thing that I do want to spend a little time on, which is Hardware's next story. After seeing Icon at the end of his own series, Hardware has been researching him. Curtis has learned that the Union Army found his spacecraft during the Civil War and took custody of it. It's being housed in Washington, D.C., where Hardware goes to retrieve it. He fights some guard robots in easily one of the worst-drawn fight scenes that I've ever seen, much less as part of the Milestone comic books, and he claims his prize, which is a gigantic crate. When he returns to his hideout, and why Curtis still has a hideout, I'm not sure, given the way that his comic ended. Maybe he's a fugitive, maybe he's not. He opens the massive crate. Curtis does not find a spaceship inside it, though. He finds a time machine. It was built by Benjamin Branacker, a real-world figure of some controversy, and it seems to come with a user manual. The story ends there with a teaser for the 2023 series Icon vs. Hardware, which leaves me with just so many questions. How exactly has Curtis been researching Icon? I can believe that Curtis, somehow, missed Icon's UN address. I can almost believe that he hasn't heard about Icon and Rocket's actions in Paris Island up to this point. But otherwise, Icon, Augustus Freeman, is a bit of a recluse, and he was shown rarely interacting with the rest of the world, except for Raquel and her extended world. I don't think that his personal history is widely known, and we saw nothing to indicate that the United States government released what they knew about him, as they clearly have history. So where did Curtis get his information from? And if the Union Army confiscated Icon's ship, then why would they leave it in Washington, D.C. all of this time? And why did Curtis know about the secret tunnels? And if those tunnels are important enough to be defended by robot guards, why aren't there security cameras? Maybe Curtis got his name cleared at the end of Hardware, but now he's wanted by the government for stealing government property. And if the time machine comes with a user's manual, why hasn't anyone used it? Or what if they have? What if someone's been changing time all this time? Oh, no. It was crated up. I don't think anybody could have been using it. What a waste of a perfectly good gasp. Is all of this stuff interesting? Sure, I'll give you that. But is it also a big floopin' mess? Also sure. It adds an interesting wrinkle to Hardware's upcoming fight with Icon, though, and I'll give it that. I can believe that Hardware is capable of designing a new suit and more weapons, and that he can/will be able to fight Icon on a physical level. But I also thought that Icon winning was pretty much a foregone conclusion. He has an inhuman physiology, he can adapt to almost any threat, and he has a wide array of superpowers, many of which attack from a distance, and so Hardware just kind of is going to stand there and get shot at by I-beams. Icon, as far as I'm concerned, was definitely going to win this one. But giving Hardware a time machine allows him to attack Icon in a way that he can't defend against. Historically. And I'll give you that is super interesting. Icon vs. Hardware is currently slated for a February 14th of 2023 released miniseries with writers Reginald Hudlin and Leon Chills, who co-wrote most of Icon and Rocket together, which bodes well. I really liked that particular series. Obviously, it's in my top spot, so seeing the same writing team returning is exciting. The book is going to be drawn by Dennis Cowan, who was also the main penciler of the Hardware series, and I had quite a few artistic complaints about that book, so I'm a little less thrilled with that, but we will see if a different writing team can maybe smooth some of those edges out. I am very excited to see Hardware written by a different writing team, because I liked the character, but I did not really like his comic. That's one of my least favorite of the era, so this is going to be a fresh coat of paint for me a little bit. On February 7th, we will be getting Static Shadows of Dakota, with returning author Vita Ayala and returning art team Nicholas Draper Ivy and Crisscross. Given how much I dug Static by the end of it, I am super excited for this one. Same team, same character, and early materials that have been shown so far show the Milestone debut of Eben, who can turn into shadows and was a big part of the Static Shock cartoon. He is the mysterious threat teased at the end of Static Season 1, so this is a direct follow-up to that series, and I am glad to see it. There is also a 30th anniversary one-shot being published on February 21st in honor of Black History Month with a variety of creative teams. It sounds a little bit like Milestones in History in concept, and they're already teasing that one of the stories sees an adult Static team up with Batman Beyond. And that's dope. Fans of Batman Beyond may remember that the Justice League of the Future showed up at some point in the cartoon, and Static was a seasoned member of the team. That idea has never been referenced in the world of the comics, though, and this is going to be the first time that we see it. Artist and writer of this one, Nicholas Draper Ivy, has been posting some in-work progress on his Instagram page, so if you're as excited for this as I am, you can get a little bit of a sneak peek over there. This is the first time that Draper Ivy is acting as a writer, so it's going to be interesting to see how he does. I am a bit sad that we aren't seeing a project specifically starring Rocket, Duo, or the Blood Syndicate in this next wave of titles. And I won't lie, I am a bit annoyed that Icon and Hardware are sharing a book. Milestone goes to all this trouble to set them up and make them interesting characters in their own right, and then they just smash them all together? Is that all I have to look forward to now? No continuation of individual stories, just beat-em-up crossover events? I mean, we do have Static Shadows of Dakota as basically a follow-up series, so hopefully that's going to be more the trend than Icon versus Hardware. We also still have a few dangling ideas that haven't been picked up anywhere yet. Milestone Returns introduced a racist Falcon character and seemed to set him up as a problem for Icon and Rocket to deal with, and we have seen neither hide nor hair nor feather of that guy. With no name to go on, I haven't had much luck searching for his OG Milestone counterpart either, so I can't make any guesses about where he might show up in the future. Additionally, we still have Dharma, the old man who appeared in Milestone Returns, promising a great conflict to come. Does he mean the battle between Icon and Hardware? The fight against the Demon Fox? I have no idea as of yet, but I hope that his existence isn't forgotten about for long. Milestone Returns was published in July of 2021, so it's already over a year old and it is approaching its second birthday. I feel like we've just kind of moved on past this idea. As far as danglers are concerned, we also have the Metal-Winged Woman from Blood Syndicate issue 3, who appeared on the cover, but did not appear inside the issue and has no name, and I have no idea who this character is supposed to be. If that was meant to be a teaser, it really failed, as far as I'm concerned. Hi folks, this is future editor version of Ben coming in real quick with an update. I was doing a little bit of extra research, prepping the Instagram and Facebook posts for Comic Book Breakdown, which you should go subscribe to and do all that kind of stuff. And in doing so, I did discover the identity of this mysterious character. She is apparently named Iron Butterfly, and I didn't look up any other information about her, because again, I'm trying to experience these comics as a new reader, so I didn't want to do too much background research. But I learned this, of course, on mycomicshop.com, where I found the original solicitation for Blood Syndicate issue 3, and that would indicate that Iron Butterfly was a member of Hannibal and Roland's military unit when they were serving in Sadag. That clearly does not seem to be the case, as she's very clearly an enemy of Hannibal when they see each other, and she seems to be Sadagi in origin. It's hard to tell. But clearly Milestone knows something here that they're not sharing with us quite yet, and it seems very weird to me that you would have a solicitation mention that she's an ally, and then this weird pivot within the episode that she's clearly an enemy. But I'm hoping we'll get more information as these comics continue to come out in the future. Hopefully we'll get a follow-up to Blood Syndicate in late 2023, but I just want to let you all know there is something there. I don't know what it is, but hopefully we'll find out in the future. Thank you. Bye. Finish the episode. No bye. Finish the episode, then bye. I'm also a little bit torn on Milestone's continued lack of ongoing comics, you know? I'm used to comic book companies putting out ongoing stories on a monthly basis. Marvel, DC, Image, Crosstone, Wildstorm, Variant, Cliffhanger, all of them published monthlies when you're not battle chasers and you're late every 6 to 8 months. And some part of me just assumed that Milestone's initial run of titles were just them, testing the waters. See how they sold, see how the public reacted to them, and then they could just choose what to continue from there. But that hasn't happened so far, and we're still getting this series of miniseries style of release. And for a smaller publisher with a niche portion of the audience, I suppose it does make sense to control your output really carefully. Better to produce smaller runs that you can control the quality of than produce monthly books just to, fulfill some kind of unspoken industry standard? Honestly, this level of control allows Milestone to control their quality. Like I said, they can plan their stories well in advance and manage their scheduling to prevent titles being late. It is a change for me as a reader and as a shopper, to be sure, but it isn't necessarily a bad one. I do have to admit that I would still like a regular publishing schedule, though. If you're only going to publish 2 or 3 series at a time, that's fine, but then do a wave in the first half of the year, always start in February, and then do a wave in the second half of the year, always launching and ending at the same time. That way, as a shopper, I can at least expect regular comics, even if what those individual comics are going to be is different every time. You know, it's hard to be excited for a comic book if you don't know when it's coming. The return of Milestone as a company and as a universe has been long awaited by its fans. The industry has long speculated what form it would take, what titles they should publish, and what creators should work for the company. I'm glad to see them back, bringing in familiar takes from the original company with new talent who have fresh takes on these characters for the modern age. Milestone's dedication to diversity is well on display, with Black Americans, Spanish Americans, and several Asian Americans leading their titles. There are also several characters on the LGBTQ+ spectrum, which is great to see. I would like to see more leading ladies get the focus, but I am willing to give Milestone time to get there. There are several hiccups in the shared universe concept that Milestone uses. There are a few comics that are flawed, often trying to do too much, to the point of butchering what they do try to accomplish. That said, I think that Milestone has successfully won me over in general with its characters, investing me in their personalities and situations to a point where I'm going to be continuing to check them out as we move on. I want to see these rough patches ironed out. I want the continuity to flow smoothly. And I want to see these characters interacting in ways that are natural and support their stories. Is that something that is happening right now? I would argue not. But I do think that they can get there. And that's what I want to see, and that's probably what's going to keep bringing me back to these books. I think that my personal ranking remains Icon and Rocket as the single best book that Milestone made. It looks great, it reads well, it's got a big concept that is grounded in how reality works, and the lead characters balance each other out perfectly. It is a solid, flooping comic. Blood Syndicate takes the number 2 spot with its large, diverse cast of characters and a more compelling threat in the form of Holocaust. I also think that Crisscross delivers some solid artwork, easily some of my favorite in the company so far. Static is in 3rd place thanks to a relatively weak start and some fairly ill-defined threats, but it absolutely crushes Virgil's emotional journey and his relationships with his family and friends, and I love that. I'm super torn on how I want to place Duo and Hardware, though. I think that Duo delivers the more packaged story overall, and I think that David and Kelly are interesting complements, and the background concepts of the Immutables has just so much potential to it. But the book is called Duo, and it spends so much time bouncing David and Kelly between threats that they never really get to star in their own comic, you know? Hardware, in comparison, definitely delivers on Hardware, and I do like his overall journey. But he's also a lead character who doesn't want to lead. He actively distances himself from the rest of his cast, he tells them not to get involved, and the book kind of fails to close out on any of its plot lines or connect its characters' narratives together. So I guess that kind of cements it, actually. As much as I like Cowan and Sankowitz's artwork on Hardware more than I like Koi Fam on Duo, I have to say that Duo is my 4th favorite comic, and Hardware sits in the number 5 spot. What about yourself, dear listener? What was your favorite out of all these books? Or least favorite? Are you going to check any of these out yourself? I hope so. And if so, let me know. On the Facebook page, the Instagram page, shoot me an email, whatever you want to do. I'm fine with any of it. So next week, I am taking a week off. At least from talking about comics. We'll be doing a good old-fashioned catch-up episode next week and talking gossip. I haven't done one of these since before we started our exploration of the Milestone books, and we had the Halloween episode come out in the meantime, right in the middle of it. It's been about 2 months, so we're definitely due. Then, the week after, we're going to start our next series and begin to close in on episode 200. We're only 4 episodes away from episode 200. Join me in a week for a breakdown, catch-up, and the reveal of what our next breakdown's gonna be. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.